So I'm on the trail. I've been hiking about 10 minutes on the Delicate Arch Trail, and you guys can't see anything, but it's pretty spectacular out here. The stars are really bright, nice clear night tonight. It is a half moon, so I don't know how well we'll be able to see the Milky Way, but once we get there, we'll take a look and see. And pretty quiet, and no one else seems to be on the trailhead, so I have it all to myself. But it is pretty cold. So check back in a little bit. Well, I'm just turning the corner. Just a few more steps, and around this corner will be a view of Delicate Arch. So I'm almost there. It's been a little more strenuous hike than I thought it would be, but not too bad. Definitely cold out here in December, but almost there, so hopefully it's worth it. So I made it to the top, and if I let my eyes adjust, I can actually make out the arch and the bowl that the arch is sitting on. Just with the moonlight. It's actually really spectacular, really peaceful up here at night. I'm the only one up here, and it's completely quiet. But there's enough moonlight, and the position of the moon is such that the Milky Way is not visible, even with a long exposure. But that's okay. There's still some amazing shots I've been able to get here at the rim of the arch. So I'm going to continue taking a few night shots here, a few long exposures, and using higher ISOs, and then we're going to try to do a nighttime panorama here. So hopefully they turn out good. We'll see what the end result is, and then I've got to still walk out of here about an hour back down to the parking lot, trailhead. So wish me luck. Okay, so I spent about an hour up on the bowl of the Delicate Arch area, taking various photographs, experimenting with different settings, different ISO settings, and as well as compositions, trying to find the best composition with the time that I had. This location is really kind of deceptive. It's hard to tell exactly how big things are and how far away objects are. The arch itself is about 65 feet tall, if I remember right. And so if you were to walk over to it, you'd be just a dot there in the bottom of the arch. And so, taking the time to move around in a place like this, especially at night by yourself, I was trying to hurry a little bit and make it back out at a decent hour. So I didn't have a ton of time for looking for composition, but the other challenge was, there was moonlight, but not quite enough moonlight to really see exactly where I was. So in order to find a composition, I actually had to take a frame, a long exposure frame, a 30-second frame with the camera, and then look at the back of the camera to really study and see what the composition was going to be. So those are all challenges of night photography. But I ended up taking several shots with the idea of stitching them together into a panorama, and we can take a look at some of those shots now and the settings that I use. So I was shooting full res RAW on the Canon 5DS, and the lens I was using was I rented a Canon 16-35 2.8 lens. Great lens, especially for landscape photography. And one of the nice things about this particular lens is that wider aperture. The 2.8 really lets you let in a lot of light. Really versatile lens with the zoom to 35mm. So it turns out the composition in this location was actually better at the 35mm mark on this lens. I could have shot full wide, but by zooming in you get a little more detail in those farther away structures, and so it turned out 35mm was a better focal length here. F-stop I left wide open, 2.8, and then the exposure time I was using was 30 seconds for each of these frames. Turns out on the ISO settings, I was experimenting with lower settings and then a little bit higher settings, And it turns out the full ISO on this camera, 6400 ISO, didn't turn out too noisy. I was kind of surprised there how clean these images are. So if you take a look here, I started, of course I'm on a tripod, and so I started fairly far to the left to include these structures on the ridge of the bowl, and then just loosening and tightening the swivel on my tripod to reframe the shot to include um, enough overlap that you feel comfortable with, so that the program can stitch these together, but not so much that we end up with 30 frames for one panorama. So you can kind of see here the amount of overlap that I used, and we just continue the process. Remember that each of these is a 30-second exposure, so you're activating your shutter, waiting for 30 seconds, and then loosening the swivel, rotating the camera slightly, and then tightening that swivel again and taking another 30-second exposure. So we have several shots here. It took quite a bit of time just to shoot this one panorama. Once you have all the images for your panorama, I put them in a folder so I know where they are, and then in Photoshop, if you just go to File, Automate, Photo Merge, most of the time this auto layout works great for panoramas, especially if you've provided enough overlap in your images. So, 99% of the time I'm using the auto layout here. You just go to browse for the images, and they are right here. So select all the images in your pano set, click open, and we want to blend the images together, and so we hit OK. This is the one I did previously, but here it is now, stitching those images together again, and we'll speed this up for the sake of the video. Okay, once that's completed, you have your stitched panorama, and you can see here that did a very nice job. One thing with night photography, a lot of times the sky, especially if it's a night when the moon is shining, the sky will look really bright. In fact, this almost looks like it could be a daytime shot. Some of the giveaways that this isn't a daytime shot is you can see these little points of light, the stars in the sky, which you just won't get during the daytime. But there's enough moonlight here that it's really doing a nice job of illuminating the scene, and it's quite a flattering light too, a very soft light, mostly the position of the moon that is causing that. You can see where there is a little bit of shadow. The shadow is harsh, so it is almost equivalent to like a noonday sun, but it kind of gives you a different effect with the moon illuminating the scene instead of the sun. So one thing we can do to kind of improve this, I think, is to reduce the exposure here in the sky, and you could do that a few different ways. The way I'm going to do it is with a piece of software called the Nik collection. And Nik software, I think they're purchased by Google. You can just Google the name here, though. It's NIK collection, and it does cost. I think it's $100, maybe it's $200, $150, something like that. It's a really powerful collection of filters and tools for a variety, really, of different types of photography. But I really like, if we go in here to Color Effects Pro, so all these are included in the Nik collection. If you go to Color Effects Pro, okay, so here's the Nik collection loaded up, and we already have the last filter I used, which is this graduated filter. In landscape photography especially, graduated filters are very useful in darkening the sky. If you look at an actual graduated filter, it actually does start out less transparent or more opaque, darker at the top, and then transitions to fully transparent near the bottom. And so this is the same idea, only done in software. So with the graduated filter, we can choose the color of the filter. I think this blue works pretty nice for the night sky. So we'll try that number 1 there. You can change the opacity, and darken it even more if we want, and choose how that blends in with our landscape. Something like that feels pretty natural. So I've already been through this filter and kind of optimized it for this image. And you can see that in this copy here. So before the graduated filter and after. And that's all I really have done to this image. I was really quite pleased with the way that it turned out. And I've actually had this panorama printed. I used Canvas Pop. It's canvaspop.com to print a 50-inch wide copy of this print and panorama. So we'll see how that turns out when that arrives. But yeah, quick little tutorial on shooting in the night sky, some of the challenges that go along with photographing at night, and then my process for stitching together a panorama and applying some edits. So I hope you enjoyed this quick little tutorial. Be safe out there when photographing at night, and be sure to share your results in the Camera Stupid Facebook sharing group, and we'll see you next time.